Hello, I'm here to resume our educational series. We had done a bunch of this last year and then we had to stop for reasons some of you are aware of. So we're going to try and resume it, and I'm going to start with one of my favorite topics, which is harnesses. We're going to do a bunch of videos on this, but today I would like to focus on one specific aspect of it. Recently, a lady told me that she had been discouraged from using harnesses because she was told that the harnesses pinch on lymph nodes that are there near the forelimb. Basically, they're in the kind of the underarm area. So down here, sort of down here. And so collars were better than harnesses. Is this true? Yes, but the way this has been packaged is quite problematic in that it actually makes two implications, kind of unsaid implications. One is that these lymph nodes are only there in that area and they are not there in the neck, and therefore collars don't damage lymph nodes, only harnesses do. And the second is that lymph nodes are really the only criteria or the primary criteria, and that there aren't any other structures that we need to be concerned about when it comes to use of collars. Now, both of these could not be further from the truth. Firstly, lymph nodes are actually distributed all over the body, and then there are significant clusters of it in some areas, and they're kind of named. And yes, the underarm area. In fact, we have lymph nodes and lymph node cluster in the underarm area too. It's called the axillary lymph nodes, and dogs too. It's called the same thing. But guess where else there are lymph nodes? In the neck. Now, what do lymph nodes do? They filter out metabolites and toxins from the fluids in the body, and the ones in the neck are servicing the brain area, the brain and the eyes. So I would argue that the lymph nodes in the neck are of bigger concern, are as critical if not more than the ones in the forelimb or the underarm area. The second thing is that the neck houses a lot more than lymph nodes. It's not the only consideration. Yes, we need to be worried about the lymph nodes, but what else does the neck have? The windpipe that carries oxygen into the body, the food pipe, what we call the voice box, blood vessels, arteries and veins that service the eyes and the brain, thyroid gland, thymus gland. I have to look at my notes because there is so much. The tongue bone, the spinal cord, the vertebral column, and inside that the spinal cord, and all the nerves and arteries that come out of it. So there's a lot going on there, and I will do a deep dive on many of these in the videos to come. But the point I'm trying to make is that the neck is actually quite vulnerable because of all of this, and because it's actually the highway between your heart, lungs, and your brain. So your life depends on this. And what's interesting is other vital organs are encased in hard bony structure. So we have the skull that's kind of protecting the brain, and the rib cage protecting the heart and the lungs, but not the neck. The neck is quite thin and unprotected, and whatever bones we have in there run through the middle. They're not protecting around, and so that makes the neck very, very vulnerable. So vulnerable that if you were to strangle somebody, you would, I hope you don't want to strangle anybody, but you would go for the neck, not the underarms. In fact, if a predator wants to kill a prey, one of the most efficient ways to do it is to go for the neck, what we call going for the jugular, because it really is the most vulnerable part of the neck. So by saying that the lymph nodes are there in the forelegs or the underarms, it's very misleading. It's a bit like saying, hey, don't carry the baby by putting your arms under the armpit and carry because there are lymph nodes there, which there are. So instead, why don't you pick up the baby by the neck? See how misleading that is? So that's the bit about the lymph nodes. Now, does that mean that it's okay to to put a dog on a harness and allow a dog to pull so that the damage can be done to those lymph nodes? Absolutely not. The front legs, the back legs, these are all quite important. We love our limbs too. We need them. And if the dog pulls a lot on any equipment, it is going to cause damage. So if it's around the legs, it can cause damage to a lot of things. The soft tissue, the joints, the blood vessels. Yes, there is damage that can be done. So we do need to get a dog to not pull on the leash and to calm the dog down. And we'll talk about how to do that and those aspects a little bit more as well. So we do need to do that. It doesn't mean that a dog can be allowed to pull on anything. We do have to address that. And also the kind of harness matters. So we do want to look at the kind of harness that's actually not pushing down here, not creating too much restriction in terms of the movement and not altering the gait so much. So we'll talk about that as well. So these are things to consider, but that does not mean that the collar is better. The collar, if the dog pulls, is sitting in a very, very vulnerable area, and the organs that it can do damage to can be life-threatening. The arm, if it gets damaged, the leg, if it gets damaged, very sad, it's terrible, we have to avoid it, but it's not life-threatening. But the neck, it can be life-threatening. So I hope that kind of answers the question on the whole lymph node in the forelimb area. We will get into deeper topics. We will talk about some of the anatomy. Maybe you'll become a little bit of an anatomy geek by the end of this series. So we'll talk about all these aspects that I touched upon and then some more in the future videos to come. If you have any questions on the lymph node aspect of it, do send them across, or anything to do with harnesses, send them across. I'll try to make sure that I'm addressing all of them in the videos that are to come. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next video.